So how did we get to this theme? Well, it had to do with the music. I had recently put together a pre-show music playlist for a live event that we had done for the college. So when I was trying to decide on what music to use really early on in the editing process, I was playing through music that I had recently downloaded from our service that we license music from. And I remembered this track and thinking of how interesting it was and how kind of fun it was. It started just coming to me like, okay, what would this look like if I was going to use this music? I just had in my head just these kind of vector shapes and this grid, this old video game style of these lines and shapes, just this idea of you zooming in slowly into the horizon. That's where I found this grid. I slowed it down and I had an issue with it looping. It didn't loop perfectly. So what I did was I brought it in and created a compound clip, and I had to kind of just line up so when these lines pass and the next clip starts, that it looks like it's pretty smooth. Once I layered the color of this bluish color that we were using along with the grid, I was like, this is perfect. This is exactly what I was looking for. So right here at the beginning, these graphics were made in Keynote. And what you can do in Keynote is you can export a transparent background. You just have to make sure your background for the slide is set to no fill. And then when you go to export it, so let's export. And in this case, I used a PNG file. So we would pick PNG and tell it to export with transparent background. You could also export a movie this way. Let's say you wanted to create some kind of animation in Keynote. And this is what I did in my last video. When the title of the next section would come up, there was some kind of animation, and all these animations were built into Keynote. They required minor modifications, and I speed ramped them a little bit in Final Cut. But to get me 90% of the way there, this was the quickest way to do it. If you wanted to keep an animation, we could just leave these settings here, and we would go to Custom under Video, and we need to change this to ProRes 444. And make sure export with transparent backgrounds is selected. Now, of course, I would up the resolution to a UHD resolution right here, but doing this will allow you to have a transparent background when you move it into Final Cut. So it's not actually black background, it's transparent. There's nothing there. So you might ask, well, why even use Keynote for this? Well, so one was the animation. If you were doing animation, this is an easy way to get some animation. And the other thing is that just the layout tools are great here. So you can do these things, of course, in Photoshop, and I do that all the time. But if you're just trying to throw something together and you want to add some, effects like just a simple reflection, just as easy as doing a checkbox, and just things like that, laying out everything. I can just jump into here a little bit quicker than I would in Photoshop, for instance. So that's why I like to use Keynote for making titles or basic animations for videos. So right here, we had this kind of slight zoom in, and that's just added with keyframes. What's happening here is as the time goes on, these numbers increase. So we can take a look at that's the beginning and that's the end. And then I always like to have our logo appear here. And it just seemed kind of strange to have the logo come in with it because it was so far to the right in the lower corner there that I decided to make that separate. So all I did was I just cropped the logo off and then just laid a second copy of the video here, which is also cropped because it would be doubling itself up. So I could have, found the logo, got it saved somewhere and brought it in and lined it up and everything. But this is the simplest solution. And it's always, the process is already complicated enough. So try to find these little things you can do to save yourself time. And the image quality wasn't affected by what I've done here. It really is a fine solution for what you're trying to do. So let's talk about the intro here. So originally the video was going to be very chaotic, and what was going to happen is that I was going to be making dinner. That was kind of the idea. And so a pot is boiling over on the stove, and toast is catching on fire in the toaster, and I was going to have smoke, and my daughter was going to run past me while I'm trying to make this video. And just all these things of chaos. It was a little bit over the top, I will admit. And so as I was kind of scaling that back and trying to think of, okay, what should I really do for this video? So I settled on, okay, just my daughter running by with a lightsaber type sword, and that's distracting enough and helps make the point I'm trying to make. I'd already actually done this process about 6 months ago over spring break. I was looking for a video project to do with my daughter. So what we did was we took some toilet paper rolls, we taped them together, acted like she had a sword a few times, and then I brought it in and made this quick clip. It's only 14 seconds, but it took a lot of work to get that 14 seconds. Give yourself a challenge, because I had no idea how to do it. I tried several solutions and they didn't work. And finally I found one that did work. I really like that idea of pushing yourself to do something that you haven't done before. One of the parts I really like about this clip is how this happened at 2 separate times. So I recorded her part first, and let's go to that real quick here. So this is just her running across. There is an actual blade and it's lit up. On the later segment where I recorded myself holding hilt, I've detached the blade from it, and that is because I wanted to animate the blade fully extending, and it would have been more work to crop that out than to just go ahead and take it off. But in her case, it was actually useful because it's easier if you actually have this line for tracking. So in mine, I didn't have that line. There's this lens flare that I added that just kind of goes across to help sell the whole light effects. It's very subtle. I have a portable green screen right here, and then I have this extra fabric that I've been using for 20 years. I bought it at Walmart one time, 20 years ago, making that stuff last. Because I needed to extend I needed her to walk across the whole frame, and this portable green screen we have doesn't cover the whole thing. I needed to mask out the rest of the background. So you can see here, I've cut out what we didn't need. What I also wanted to do is I wanted her to move across the frame quicker at the beginning than it actually occurred. So you can see I'm actually shifting this whole frame. So let's watch, just watch. We're going to move it to the side and then even more some. This just helped push her faster across. And this is one of the nice things about when you've got something that you can key out, you can move the object across the screen faster. I'm going to go ahead and layer this back on top. So this is the added effect, and the plugin we'll talk about in the other video deals with the motion blur. This took a lot of takes too. It's really hard for any of us to imagine what something looks like when it's not there. And so that becomes a challenging thing when you're working with talent and you're telling them this is going to be happening, but it's not happening. You can't see it. In a previous video I made, I used stands and I put pieces of paper on the stands for where the actual line of sight would be, because I needed the person to look at something. It's one of those things you got to think about when you're compositing things like this. You're making things exist as they weren't. So you have to think about, well, what should that look like in real life? It just takes a lot of work to get to this point, and also to decide what movement the sword needed to make, because I wanted to come close to my head, but I didn't want it to look like it was going to cut off my head, and I didn't want it to be overly, moving back and forth. So just getting that sword movement right was a decent amount of work. So I'm recording this by myself, and what I'm doing here is imagining her coming in from the corner, ducking, hoping that it works out. So here's it all together. It was just fun to see how it all worked out. For this segment, I wanted to talk about organizing your files and everything, and I thought of the idea of a messy desktop, which I have been guilty of before. But then I started thinking about like a literal messy desktop, like a desktop that has stuff all over it. So that's where the idea of this came from. It was really amusing in my head. I'm not sure how it translates to the video, but it made me laugh a lot. This part was pretty tricky because I needed the camera to be right above me, and it's actually tilted at an angle. And I printed out these papers and I had some photos. Now the hardest thing about this too was the camera is right above me. I don't want my head sticking into the shot, showing up on the desk. In order to move the papers around, my head's low, my arms are up, and I'm trying to move the papers around but not look like a monster. So it's just like trying to be as natural as I could while I'm, my hands are out. And so it took a few takes to get that to look natural, because I would record it and I'm just like, no, it doesn't look right, and have to redo it. Took a little practice, but we got there. That was just my idea of how to make something amusing out of a common situation. here's where we first get into the screen recordings. It started because I wanted to display the mobile interface in a way that looked nice on video instead of just doing, a vertical strip in the middle of the screen, which is fine. I just wanted to do something different here. When I found this template that was available to use just by crediting the author, I just layered the interface on top of that and added an additional drop shadow to the back, which you can't see because there's no background here. But once I already had that look of the phone, I knew I wanted the computer interface, the desktop interface, to look similar. And I couldn't really find a computer screen that looked kind of like the way the mobile device did. Went into Photoshop and created a border that was the same relative dimensions that I needed, and then just layered things on top of each other. So here's how it looks like. We just got the border on top of the video, just using the tools over here to crop and to transform the video, and then just layer it behind it. So that's where that idea came from. Also added a drop shadow behind the desktop image too, so there's a slight shadow right around the back of it. Right here, this first transition, I wanted it to be interesting, and so I had this idea in my head of like, what if we could go like you just get sucked into the mobile device. I tried using some transitions, but I could never get exactly what I was looking for. So what I did here was I just used keyframes, and you can see it right here. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. I'm just using keyframes to shrink this image. So right over here on the right hand side, you'll see, so we start at 100 and we just go down until we get to the point where it transitions to the mobile device. Now, this isn't the prettiest thing in the world because as the dimensions shrink, the border the lines aren't perfect and the text squishes, but it's fine. It works good for what it is, and it happens so quick that the transition is really smooth. Now, once it locks into the mobile device, that animation was just very abrupt. It happens and then it's just like, bam, you're just there, and it felt weird. It felt like there needed to be something more. And so that's where I came up with the idea of kind of doing this bounce here. So it's almost like the momentum and the force continues for a second as it's absorbed by the device. Right here, you'll see it just kind of goes in and out just a little bit, not a lot, but just there's this idea of the force kind of reverberating for a little bit of time. The same idea of when we come out of this screen. So right here, we come out of it and we stretch back out. Now, originally, when I was trying to do this, I was trying to do the same exact thing. So we take the mobile device and we just stretch the screen horizontally. It's easy to shrink an image, but when you start to stretch something, it starts to look bad quickly. As this was happening, and we were getting to like right about here, it's just the text looked terrible. And I was like, yeah, that's not good. That doesn't look good. So that's where I came up with the idea of like, okay, we'll go to white first and then start stretching and then crossfade into the interface so that we can get right about here, and then we make this transition. And again, I wanted to have the bounce. So here's that animation, the first one, and then there's the second one. So it all happens really quick, but it took a decent amount of time to figure out how to make that look good. You don't want to go like over the top with transitions all the time. In fact, earlier on where I have this introduction, there's just a straight cut, and the cut only exists because I kept messing up my lines and I needed something to kind of break up this whole talking bit. So there was a little bit more interesting imagery. I do use a lot of transition effects in this video, and that I feel like that goes with the nature of it, the theme of it. Just be mindful. Everything you do, everything you include in your video needs to have a purpose. It needs to push along the story in some way or another. And if it's not doing that, then it probably is a distraction. It can be hard to get rid of these things, especially if you put a lot of work into it and you've already recorded it and you realize like this isn't 100% the best way to do this. Make sure everything you have in your video pushes the story on, pushes the viewer forward to the next thing. One of the aspects of transitions I like to do is if there is a transition like this. So I'm going to play. So there's a sound effect I've added to it. Swooshes and like that sound effect is is a prize wheel. It took me forever to find that sound effect, and one that I could use properly with licensing. I like to have the sound again help push the image forward. It needs to match what's going on. Whatever sound effect you can have, my thought is, what sound would that transition make in real life if it existed? And so that one was kind of the spinning wheel, and I was thinking Price is Right, Wheel of Fortune. What is that sound? Like a roulette wheel. Just trying to figure it out. I am standing up at my stand-up desk converter thing that goes on top of a kitchen table. Originally, I wanted to do this. Now, the color correction I've added to myself is to match the background, so that's going to be off. What I wanted to do was to light myself and light the background. I just didn't have enough lights to pull it off. So this is an easy solution if you happen to have a green screen, a portable green screen, or green fabric. Light yourself properly, light the talent properly, and then get the background separate if you can. There's all kinds of issues you can have with compositing and keying, but if you can do it, that's an easy way to make the most out of having limited equipment. So that's what I did there. Once I found the music and decided of this direction for the look, that's when I decided to cut out the background. Maybe I can use it for something else though. Looks nice. Now you notice here I have the captioning turned on. The main reason why I put captions here was so that I could do the voiceover. So I could go up here to Window and record voiceover. Once you have the voiceover interface up and you start recording, it'll start playing back the video, and also I can read the captions. Of course, you can also export the captions to attach them to your video or burn them in, but it's an easy way to make sure you say what you're intending to say while you're recording a voiceover. So one of the things to keep in mind when you're using multiple cameras, and in this case I used one camera, I just recorded 2 different segments and I moved the camera in between, is that the camera has to be in a natural position. So for instance, during this segment, as the talent, the camera is off to my right hand side. So when I come and I record the close-up shot, the camera is still really off to my far right hand side, and now it can see the screen. Now if I had moved that camera from front right hand side to somewhere over here on my left hand side, it could be really awkward, because all of a sudden I am visually, the talent is switching from, I would be switching from the left hand side of the screen is where my body is at, to now if the camera was on the opposite side, my body would now be on the right hand side of the screen. So there's this disconnect that happens, and if you do that, it's just going to feel weird, and especially if you keep doing it, and if there's people involved, things get chaotic. So you always want to keep in mind the position of your cameras and make sure that there's this natural flow. You can get from right to left, but you got to have some steps in between or something to make that transition. So it's just something to keep in mind. And the other thing I was trying to figure out is, what does this grid background look like from this angle? Because I know what it looks like if it was behind me, but what does it look like from the side? I don't know, because this thing doesn't exist. So I imagine, well, at least you would have some glow from it. I scaled up the grid so that there's a little bit of purple glow underneath, but it's one of those things, like don't overdo it, don't overthink it, because I can't really change this animation, and even angling it doesn't look right. So just try to come up with a solution, and so that's what I did here. You can see a little bit of the purple coming through, not much, and it's a quick shot. Here you can also see I've got a color correction mask going on. I usually do this to adjust for white balance issues, because a lot of times our computer screens aren't going to match the lights that we're using or the lights that are already present in the room. So a lot of times I will use a correction to adjust that white balance. Here I'm using it to make it brighter, because my screen was as bright as it could be, and still it just doesn't seem, it doesn't really match these screens that I'm showing you. It's still not, not as bright, but you don't want to overdo it. So here I just have that mask over it to brighten it up. You could do this many different ways. I'm using plugin, but I've used the built-in color correction many times. Just create a mask and you're good to go. This whole sequence started originally on my wife's birthday. I had this idea in my head of, for OneNote, I wanted to share a Pi. The idea is I'm collaborating on a group project with some other people, and I have this Pi and I want to share it with them. Either it comes out of the computer and smashes somebody in the face, or they reach out and grab it. Just all these different ideas of like, how do you take a Pi and you move it from one place to another, kind of this teleportation type idea. Again, it's one of those things where all these great ideas, but do they push the story forward? So I still try to be a little bit funny right here, because what I'm doing is not the process for making a key lime pie at all. I think, this is pretty ridiculous. I'm putting whole eggs, Ritz crackers, and sugar into a mixer and just pouring that into an empty pan and sticking it in the oven. So when I originally recorded this segment right here, which is just sliding the pie out onto the table, which is actually kind of heavy, so it doesn't slide as I imagined it would. Here I wanted to take a picture of it, and just trying to get these two movements lined up, me sliding the pie onto the table and getting all that lined up was really complicated. I considered trying to composite this later, but even that, I was just thinking about how complicated that would be. So this is what it looked like with me holding the camera, and I also had to rack the focus. As I move the hand in front of the camera, I need to focus on my phone. At the same time, I'm trying to do something on my phone. So nailing the focus each time was really hard. So the first time I recorded this was on my wife's birthday. The reason why I had key lime pie for her birthday was so I could make this video. So yeah, I recorded this, and it was a few weeks before I could get back to this project because we had other things going on. The memory card had gotten erased and written over many times possibly. So I had to buy another key lime and I had to eat another key lime pie. And these are sacrifices that were made to make this video, but you got to do what you got to do. Not only that, but the end sequence, that was another part of a pie. That was only 2 slices though. I had to redo this sequence, and it was a lot easier the second time because I was home by myself and I didn't have hungry people waiting to eat. It was one of those things that seemed simple, and just getting it just right, making sure it was focused on the pie, and then as I adjusted the focus to match the phone, it was a lot of work. I originally was going to try to use one of our smaller Sony cameras in the oven, but I wasn't able to get it to work 100% like I wanted it to. And man, I was so afraid that I was going to cook something for lunch and forget the camera or something. I mean, I didn't, but it's just the whole time I'm like, okay, make sure you don't actually turn this thing on and catch everything on fire and melt the camera. So I ended up using this smaller camera that I have that's more like a GoPro style. It's a DJI Osmo Action camera. There's a little bit of color correction going on, and I letterboxed the sequence to get framing better than what it was. With the oven sequence, I actually have the light on inside the oven so that you can actually see the pan and the metal shelf. It was actually a lot brighter than it needed to be. I thought it looked kind of weird being so bright. And the other thing is, since I had the light on the whole time, when I go to close the oven, the light still stayed on. So I'm having to do a crossfade to fix that issue. Right here is the outro, and if you can have an intro and outro with some face contact with the audience, it can really help with engagement. Again, I'll go over how to make this lightsaber effect in another video. I actually tossed it to myself to catch it, and like my daughter was tossing it to me, but I was home alone, so nobody was there to toss it to me. I catch it and turn the thing on. The outro graphics again I made in Keynote, animated here in Final Cut. Just one more clip of me eating pie, because why not? So that's it. I hope you found some of this interesting. Maybe you can take away some of the ideas and the techniques that were used. Thanks for watching.